Hi, welcome to Myers ASMR. Thanks for being here. Joy is your legacy. Joy is your inherited right. Well, I'm excited about today's story time. I so admire musicians, and I like reading about their lives, their biographies, autobiographies. I just eat it up. Speaking of, I've got to have a little tea before I start to talk. This is Christmas Leaf Spice Tea by Taylor's. I just love Christmas tea and I drink it year round. I'm waiting for the Fortnum and Mason to go down in price. You know, tea with milk is just awesome. It's pretty much my main drink. Some kind of tea. For the gym, it's peppermint tea, which I then chill in the fridge. Usually I'll add some apple cider vinegar to it, and sometimes squeeze a bit of real lemon. A couple of drops of orange essential oil. That's it, no sweetener. Not for my gym tea. For this one, yeah. Well, let's get into the story. Let's see where we left off. This book is about the Rolling Stones drummer Charlie Watts, who recently passed away about 2 years ago. So, okay. We're on Chapter 1, A Prefab Childhood and a Comrade in Jazz. Let me rearrange the book and the mic. Mozart knew what he was talking about, but he should have had a good drummer. Keith Richards, 2011. The human riff was actually explaining to me about the synthesis of hillbilly and black music that customized the recipe for rock and roll, putting the match to the kindling for the nascent Rolling Stones and the generation of hopeful oinks they represented. But that payoff line has always felt like a playfully succinct overview of the man who sat behind him for 58 years. In a parallel timeline, you could imagine Wolfgang Amadeus looking up to Charlie Watts. Everyone else did. Charlie was not only the most reluctant star in all of music, he was the least likely candidate to fill the seat for so many decades with rock and roll's most global representatives. Even after he acceded to the band's repeated overtures to join their number, neither he nor anybody else thought that the Stones or their rhythm and blues racket would last more than a year. In early June 1941, with the Bismarck sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic, Germany was preparing for its invasion of the Soviet Union with troops 3 million strong. In a terrible portent of 2022, tank battles soon raged near Kiev. The Proms had just been bombed out of their headquarters at Queen's Hall, and were rehomed at the Royal Albert Hall, while Churchill's Board of Trade announced the introduction of clothing coupons. Since they had yet to be printed, margarine coupons from ration books had to suffice. 16 for a raincoat, 7 for boots. But at University College Hospital in Bloomsbury, Lil Watts had other things on her mind. Just turned 20. Islington-born Lillian Charlotte Watts, daughter of Charles and Ellen Eves, was married in 1939 to Charles Richard Watts, a month her senior, who served in the RAF as ground crew and as a driver for officers. When demobbed, he became a lorry driver for the London, Midland, and Scottish Railway, a job he was still doing as the Stones conquered Britain. On Monday, 2 June 1941, Lillian gave birth to their firstborn. Like Bill Wyman and Brian Jones, he would share his father's name. Charles Robert Watts took his first beat. At the time, the British record charts were still a decade from formal inception, but the Antro sisters were providing a tonic for the troops with Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. Soon, Glenn Miller and plenty of others, including our Vera, were forecasting bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover. Wireless sets of the day also warmed the comedy program It's That Man Again to Deanna Durbin's Waltzing in the Clouds, the Ink Spots, and Bing Cosby, while Noel Coward politely inquired, "Could you please oblige us with a Bren gun?" At the pictures, Abbott and Costello were among the top new movie stars with their third film just released, Universal's In the Navy, co-starring Dick Powell. Joan Crawford, later to feature in the collage of art for Exile on Main Street, was still finding the ones, nines in George Cukor's newly issued A Woman's Face. As a toddler, Charlie spent some time living with each of his grandmothers while his father was serving in the RAF, but he would remember little about the war years. He later said, "I heard bombs exploding in the neighborhood. I remember the mad rush from the house into the air raid shelters. I was very young. War was something of a game to me. I don't think I ever really and truly got frightened." Not only his father, but his grandfather, Charles A. Watts, uncle and cousin, also shared his forename, so his mom and dad would often call him Charlie Boy. The youngest Charles attended Friant Way Infant School in Kingsbury, northwest London, and as the war ended, he met Dave Green, 9 months his junior. They would become friends and were bandmates in many of Charlie's jazz projects on stage and in the studio for the rest of his life. Despite being 9 months younger, Dave's war memories are more vivid. "I was born in 1942 in Edgware, and we lived in Kingsbury. My dad was in the Royal Engineers. He went over to Germany on D-Day, and I remember, I must have been 2, the doodlebugs coming over. One came down in our street, about 60 houses up, and completely destroyed the house. I remember my mom put me under the stairs. That was government advice, I think." Dave remembers his mother listening to Music While You Work on the wireless, and she later said that he would sing along to the bass lines of popular songs, an early sign of what would become his career-long prominence as a double bass player. He shares his memories with such warmth and generosity that he soon becomes someone you feel you've always been friends with. About to turn 80 when we spoke for this book, he retains a self-effacing joie de vivre that would have endeared him to Charlie. In 1946, they became neighbors and soon conjoined musical spirits. Courtesy of the Luftwaffe, The two families were about to have new addresses in Pilgrim's Way, Wembley, in the prefab housing offered to so many British households affected by bomb damage. The pre-built masonette modules seem modest in retrospect, but in hard times they were a thing of wonder to the Green family. When we were at Brampton Road, Kingsbury, the prefabs weren't very far away, and I remember going up there to look at them, says Dave. The road wasn't even a road, and there were great piles of mud everywhere. But my mom loved these prefabs. The kitchen was fantastic. Very modern, self-contained, fridge, everything. She put her name down for one, and when they were finished, we moved in. Charlie and his parents were number 23 and the Greens at number 22. In 1944, Lillian gave birth to Charlie's sister Linda, to whom he was always close, especially so before he left home. The interview that she and her husband Roy Roots gave me for this book is the first she has ever granted about her brother. Indeed, Linda has maintained such a low profile that many people don't realize Charlie had a sister at all. No, they don't, because I never pushed myself to the front, she says softly, sitting with me and Roy in their home in Buckinghamshire. That's not my nature, and I know it's not what he would have wanted. But you'd be out at the front of the show and someone would say, "Oh, you're Charlie's sister. You must be so proud." And I'd say, "Yes, I am proud of him." He was never one to go over the top. 1-to-1 was ideal for him because he was quite a reserved man. He was like my mom, and I'm like my dad. He would sit there and not say a word. My grandfather was like that. After all these decades, I can't say I know the man. She speaks with nostalgic warmth about those years at home with her brother and their parents and the sense of community they shared in that compact homestead. Dad decided that because they liked sports and billiards, they would buy a half-size snooker table, says Linda. If you wanted to play a shot, you had to open the window, says Roy dryly. That brought everybody in, and my dad loved that, Linda adds. My mom was a bit more reserved, but she was all right because she was in the kitchen. Roy, 1 year older than Charlie, went on to marry Linda in 1965. Says Dave, I think the first time Charlie and I met was when I was 4 and we moved there. Our moms became very good friends. That was the thing. As we grew older, we became very close. It was just remarkable, really, that we had the same interest in jazz and developed it in tandem. Up to when we were 10, we'd be playing in the garden, Charlie told me, because it was all one thing with a little fence at the back, and we had a hole in the fence to go through. Our mums and dads were friends. Then he started to play with skiffle groups, and so did I. We played in our first jazz band together, played our first records together, and I always use him if I do anything outside of the Rolling Stones. Then, his deadpan sign-off. I wouldn't encumber him with them. My dad played a bit of piano, but not jazz, Dave explained. He used to play Les Paul and Mary Ford, stuff like that. And we had a radiogram, so it started from that kind of thing for Charlie and me when we were about 9 or 10. Of course, we went to the same school, Friant Jr., but he was a different year from me, and then we went to secondary modern school at Tyler's Croft in Kingsbury, still living in the same place. A near contemporary, there was actress Shirley Eaton, the Bond girl in Goldfinger. Another was William Woolard, the longtime presenter of Tomorrow's World. Funny enough, says Dave, I don't remember Charlie at school. I didn't see him much there. But we started collecting 78s and going to record shops together, and then LPs by Charlie Parker and Jelly Roll Morton, which I'd never heard, listening in his bedroom or sometimes in mine. Billy Wyman's splendidly detailed Rolling with the Stones places Charlie, aged all of 7, in a satin suit at his uncle Albert's wedding in Holloway. My dad bought me suits, and I wore them as smartly as I could, said Charlie. A kind of little Lord Fauntleroy, I suppose, but I do remember that I didn't like jeans and sweaters in those days. I thought they looked untidy, and I didn't feel somehow as good as I did in my little suits with the baggy trousers. So much never changed. When Dave's parents' marriage failed, he was sent to live with relatives in Yeovil, but returned to London after 2 years of bucolic bliss and reconnected with Charlie in 1953. My mom was offered a council house while she was in the prefabs, a new build back in Kingsbury, so we moved down there. I remember the fog, pea soupers, and the bus conductor walking in front of the bus. You just couldn't see. The fog was incredible. Many people died. We stayed down there a year in this new build place, and my mom reapplied to go back to the prefab. Dave remembers with a laugh. She missed them so much, and Lil Watts and everything. They were a wonderful concept. Everybody had exactly the same place, and more or less exactly the same size garden. It was utopia. It was like a community, and my mom missed that. We couldn't go back to living next door to Charlie, so we lived just down the way. The boy Watts became a teenager in June 1954 as Doris Day shouted from the highest hills and told the golden daffodils about her secret love. At Tyler's Croft, in a class of 40, Charlie began to develop his interest in art, more so than performing and studying music, which was hampered by a teacher that no one could understand. He also excelled at both football as a nippy right winger and cricket, even having a trial for Middlesex. He was a big boy with strong legs, said Lil. We often thought he would become a footballer. My earliest memory would be of him playing cricket, says Sister Linda. He was a very good cricketer, and in the loft, we've got medals that he got. He always had a good build, and Mom and Dad always helped him with whatever he wanted. It was only a 2-bedroom prefab, so my brother had the big bedroom, which should have been my Mom and Dad's bedroom. I had the smaller one, and Mom and Dad had to put you up in the front room for a good few years. Soon afterwards, Charlie took his first faltering steps as a musician on the banjo. He would say that in his extended family no one played anything except the gramophone. But that wasn't strictly true. An unlikely branch of the family tree grew in the McGill 5, the British jazz combo that Charlie went on to depth with on occasion, and who later followed the Stones' path into R&B edged pop, making the UK Top 10 in May 1964 with Mockingbird Hill. And with that, I need a sip of tea. I'm sorry if I'm stumbling and faltering a bit. I didn't realize this book was written in British English, so there are so many words here that are unfamiliar to me. names of towns and places and people that are just new. The sentence structure is different for me, so bear with me. Tea is just divine. You know, when it cools down a bit, I can really taste the flavor better. I just love black tea. You like this jacket? My boyfriend gave it to me because I used to get items from the thrift store when we were on lockdown, when COVID hit, and I was out of work. So I was just home, like, for months on end, and I just started painting and putting embellishments on my clothing, and he encouraged me. So he got me this because he knew I liked this sort of thing. Isn't that sweet? All right, that group was originally fronted by Charlie and Linda's uncle Lenny Peters, with whom Charlie played in his early drumming days. He was the only blind person I've ever known who could hang wallpaper, says Linda nonchalantly, and change a light bulb. After years of solo toil on the London pub circuit and neglected singles for labels such as Oreo and Pie, Uncle Lenny became part of Peters and Lee, remembered by survivors of the 1970s as chart-topping archetypes of pipe and slippers pop. See what I mean? What is that? Pipe and slippers pop. Okay. With glorious incongruity, their signature #1, Welcome Home, shared space in the British Top 20 in September 1973 with the Stones' Angie. Back with that banjo, Charlie didn't care for the dots on the neck, so he pulled the thing apart. At the same time, I heard a drummer called Chico Hamilton, he said, who played with Jerry Mulligan. I wanted to play like that with brushes. With his first homespun drum kit lacking a snare drum, he put the banjo head on a wooden stand that he made, turned the head around the other way, and played the round skin with wire brushes. Thus, he made ends meet until for his Christmas present. In 1955, Charlie's father and grandmother took pity on him and bought him his first proper set, a second-hand Olympic kit acquired from a fellow who played in the local pub. It arrived complete with beer stains on the skins and cigarette burns on the bass drum. I remember finding it in my auntie's bedroom, said Charlie Boy. Can't remember anything that gave me greater pleasure, and I must say the neighbors were great about the noise I kicked up. Well, thanks for listening. Like and subscribe, donate to my Cash App. Catch me in the next video, and may you find lasting happiness. Remember, joy is your legacy. Joy is your inherent right.